Should there be universal digital access granted to everybody? I mean, is this going to be the norm for the post-pandemic world? Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rojo Reads the News. I'm your host, Paul. In this commentary from China News Asia, they say the case for universal digital access as home-based computing becomes a post-pandemic norm. In an increasingly digital world where more will work and learn from home, reliable technology and internet access are needs, not wants, says Professor Irene Ng and Lim Sun Sun. So I have been saying this for years. There's a great book by Thomas Friedman called The World is Flat. Bestseller. I recommend everyone read it. I read that about 20 years ago, and it really makes the case for how the internet is flattening the world. It used to be where you would need to compete with just the people in your local community, maybe for jobs and for careers and to live a good life. Now, because of the internet, you're competing with everyone in the world, and so you really need to step up your game in all areas of your life. I think this pandemic and people's responses to the pandemic has made this case even more clear. Now imagine for a moment we move into our flats, we can immediately log onto Wi-Fi internet access because every apartment comes with a router. Should this latter scenario be that inconceivable? 60 years ago, before Singapore's comprehensive industrialization, electricity and filtered water were not a given in households. Only the wealthy could afford these luxuries in their homes. Today, they are regarded as public utilities. With the United Nations declaring in 2011 of internet access as a human right, is it not time to make internet access a public utility that everyone can access as we do water and electricity? So this is in Singapore, but I understand that there are other countries that are moving towards things like this. And I also know in America, many cities offer public Wi-Fi, public access. But in your home, it still costs a pretty penny. The cost for internet access in the United States is way above and beyond that of the rest of the world. I know there's big business involved and there's a lot of money involved in all this. Could this happen in America? Is it possible that we can create this environment in America? I would love to see that. It would take a lot of work and a lot of convincing, but it is something that I think our country can explore. The question is one that bears asking after our tumultuous experience with COVID-19. With a 2-month-long circuit breaker sequestering everyone at home, families have had to develop creative strategies to blend work-from-home arrangements with home-based learning needs. Yet this new norm has also amplified a technology gap that must be closed because ultimately online inequalities have offline consequences. As local media reports reveal, the home-based learning experience was highly uneven across families. Whereas affluent families fretted over higher-order concerns such as the quality of online instruction and children's excessive screen time, less well-off families grappled with basic problems of device ownership and internet access. Yes, that's true. I've seen it here in China. Oftentimes, a family will have a couple of mobile phones, and they are using these phones to do business from home, and then they have to hand it off to their child so the child can do online lessons. And there's a lot of fighting going on. Yeah. There was a rapid response to this immediate digital access challenge. The minister in the Prime Minister's office and second minister for education estimated that the Ministry of Education has loaned out more than 20,000 computing devices and more than 1,000 internet access devices during the circuit breaker period. In addition, social service agencies rushed to help their clients apply for subsidized computers and internet connection through the NEU PC Plus scheme. I don't know what that is. I'll have to research that one. And solicit additional digital resources through donations. But the longer-term issue we must now address is what will happen after the pandemic is over. Will students have to return the loaned devices, or can we now conceive of a world where digital access becomes a universal necessity provided as a public good? Very interesting question. The imperative to make digital access universal is a compelling one. According to Professor Jean Yuang, recent Straits Times article on her study of a national representative sample of over 5,000 children aged 6 and under. Although the Wi-Fi penetration rate is near universal in Singapore, 8% of families in her study who lived in rental units did not have a connection, and 44% lacked a computer or a laptop at home. Now, this is Singapore, a pretty wealthy, developed part of the world. Here in China, it's much, much less. That's why internet cafes are so popular in many developing countries in Asia. And believe it or not, this is still a big problem in the United States as well. Beyond learning for children, home-based computing will also be essential if low-income adults are to have any real chance to participate in more technology-based training or employment. The progress of our Smart Nation drive has also translated into a greater range of government services moving online, thus making digital access even more of a need than a want. Digital inclusion is therefore critical to prevent a growing chasm between high and low income families, one that will further widen in a world where economic and social inequalities are already gaping. Shifting to a paradigm of universal digital access entails making internet connection and computing devices more universally available. Universal internet connection might be more easily achievable. Singapore's wireless 5G program already provides free internet access across broad swaths of public space. Universal access to computing devices, though, might be more of a leap. So we spend a lot of money and a lot of resources in developing broadband access and Wi-Fi access throughout our communities, but without a device to connect to it, it doesn't do any good. You can't apply it. How might a more universal approach safeguard against the above unmet computing needs? Universal provision assumes need with less concern over deservingness. I love that word. Thus, greater universalism could materialize in the form of automatic allocation, as is the case now with baby bonus, workfare, income supplement, and silver support. Possible channels include building computing provision as part of school registration, ComCare benefit, or WIS. Stepped levels of subsidies according to household income and number of household members could also be introduced, similar to the subsidy ladders for childcare and baby bonus. So it's a needs-based test is essentially what it is. Accelerating digital literacy programs. In this fast technologizing that's a tough one, world, we must take the bold but urgent step towards recognizing basic computing as a state-supported public utility. Households would then be encouraged to assign greater priority to computers over mobile devices. Once the basic computing infrastructure is in place, subsequent units of computers or laptops also become more affordable. In tandem, digital literacy efforts must also be boosted. Invariably, better educated parents will be more tech savvy and can therefore offer more effective guidance to their children's digital access. Hitherto, some donors have been reluctant to provide internet access to needy families, citing fears that they will be vulnerable to online risks such as pornography or online gambling. Indeed, we need more intensive in-school digital literacy programs to help these children make up for the lack of scaffolding at home. However, poor digital literacy should not be used as justification to deny low-income families access to a vital resource that the rest of society benefits from. This is an interesting topic. I'm all for increasing access in digital literacy to the World Wide Web and to the internet. I think internet freedom is a very important thing. Especially living in China, where much of the internet is blocked to the masses here. Having internet access as an educator to the English portion of the internet world creates a unique challenge as an English teacher. In other countries, you can simply send a link, or you can do adequate research or lesson planning. Here, you have to do some workarounds, and my students often ask me, Paul, where can I go to get more English content so that I can study more English? And unfortunately, they don't have the access to the internet resources that a student in Vietnam or Thailand or Japan or America might have. There's a disconnect there. But access is one thing. Devices is another. Now, here in China, many people have devices. You have old grandmas, you have, farmers in the fields. Everyone has some kind of device to connect to the internet, and it's because devices here are relatively cheap. However, the rest of the world doesn't have that, and many people in America don't have these devices that can access the internet. So, there's two parts to this: supplying access and then supplying the devices to access those resources. The question is, should government provide these devices? I think it's a no-brainer that the government should provide more and more free access at public libraries, public spaces, maybe even in the private world and in apartment communities and housing communities throughout the country. That's one thing to think about. The other thing to think about is, should we provide some kind of device to access that? And I'm not talking about laptops for everybody or even an iPad for everyone, but just simply a very inexpensive device like a phone. And I'm not talking like an iPhone. I'm talking just a very inexpensive device that can be made and distributed very cheaply that can give access to those resources. It's an interesting commentary, and it's one that I support.